Hi, this is Scott Marsh from eCabinets Tips and Tricks. This is part 1 on a series of videos that I'm doing on how you can format the 5-piece door breakdown that eCabinets generates when you export their cut list into Excel. What I've got a module, DR and DWR parts list. And that's what I've named it, right down here in properties. And my subroutine, I've got it named door and drawer front parts. What we need to do first, before we do anything else, we need to make sure that the 5-piece door breakdown and the drawer front built-in house listing worksheets have actually been imported from the eCabinets cut list. If they haven't, we're going to get a runtime 9 error message. And we want to make sure that the user knows what to do if that happens. And for that, we're going to be using an on error statement. And that's going to be an on error go to label statement. So I'm going to need the following code. I'm going to say on error and then go to, and that is one word. I'm going to type a variable for the label. That's going to be ERRMSG. Okay? Now, I'm going to hit enter, and immediately after that, I'm going to type that label, that variable there, and I'm going to need colon. Now what we need to do is tell it what to do if this runtime 9 error message comes up. So I'm going to say if ERR.number equals 9, then, and I'm going to hit enter, and I'm going to type end if. What we're going to do is we're going to bring up a message box. So I'm going to say MSG box space, and it's on the prompt, so quotes, and I'm going to put my prompt in there, and just make sure that's surrounded by quotes there. Now what we need to do is tell it what type of message box we want, so I'm going to hit comma, and I'm going to use a VB critical, and you can see that right here, so I'm going to double click on that, and that's all we need for our message box. So I'm going to hit enter, and I've got 2 quotes right here. I don't need 2, and that should do it for me. So what I need to do next is I just need to exit the sub. So I'm going to hit my tab key and type exit sub, and that's just going to get out of the subroutine. Then they can import the worksheets and carry on. Now the next thing we need to do is define some variables. The first thing we need to do is set up a variable for this actual workbook, which is our master workbook. So I'm going to say dim mast wb as workbook, and I'm going to go ahead and set that. So I need to say set mast wb equals this workbook, and that's going to take care of that. Now the next thing we need is some variables for our data dump worksheet here. This is just a worksheet that we can dump data in here, do whatever we got to do with it, and then put the result into another worksheet, and that is going to be ddump. So I'm going to say dim ddump as a worksheet, and go ahead and set that. So set ddump equals the mast wb.worksheets, and parentheses, quotes, and I need the worksheet name. So I'm just going to come down here, double click on the tab, Control C, and Control V to paste in quotes and close parentheses. And the next one I need is for our door parts list. I'm going to say dim dpart as worksheet, and I'm going to go ahead and set that just like I did my data dump. So set dpart equals mast wb dot worksheets, parentheses, quotes, and the sheet tab name, and quotes and close parentheses. Now I need a variable for our 5-piece door breakdown. Now what I'm going to go ahead and do is go ahead and import that. So I'm going to go home here. I'm going to import eCabinets cut list there. I'm going to select my 5-piece door breakdown and my door and drawer front built-in house listing and import those. So there they are. I can go ahead and define those. Now the last variable we're going to need right now is a variable for the last row in our door and drawer front parts list here. If you've been watching my videos, you've seen where I've showed you how to write the code that will find the last row in a column in a worksheet. This one's going to be a little bit different. What we want to do is we want to find the last row after our heading here. I don't want to include anything from row 8 up. So if all this is blank right here, I want to make sure that the code knows that 9 will be the last row. What we're going to do is go ahead and get our variable for our last row, and that's going to be dptlr, door part list last row, and I'm going to define that as long. Now we're ready to start writing some code. What I want to do first is I want to turn off screen updating. So I'm going to come right here after my note, turn off screen updating, and I'm going to say application.screenUpdating equals false. Now we can find the last row in the door and drawer front parts list. So I'm going to come right here and tab in, and I'm going to type my variable for my door part list last row and say equals my variable for my door part list, so dpart.sales parentheses rows dot count, comma, and the column that I want to count the rows in, which is going to be A. Close parentheses and dot end parentheses XL up. Close parentheses dot row. We need to tell it what to do if it finds the last row to actually be 8. We need to tell it to be 9 instead. So I'm going to use an if statement for that. Tab, I'm going to say if dptlr equals 8, then go ahead and type end if. We're going to just tell it to be 9, so dptlr equals 9. And that's all we need to accomplish that. What's going to happen now is if all this data is already gone and it gets to that line of code, it's going to say, okay, well, last row is 8, but hey, it needs to be 9. Just remember now, if you add any rows to your heading up here, make sure you change this code. Now, the next thing we need to do is clear any existing door and door front parts that already exist in this door parts cut list. And we also want to remove any borders that might be in here. We'll be adding those back later on. So I'm just going to say dpart.range parentheses, and we're going to start with quotes A9 because we want to start in column A, row 9, okay, colon, and we want to go all the way to column E and down to the last row. So I'm going to type E in quotes there, then my ampersand, and my variable for my door parts last row in parentheses. Now we're going to say dot clear contents. Now we need to erase the existing borders, so I'm just going to copy this right here, and we're going to say dot borders dot line style equals XL none, and that's going to clear the borders in that range. Now we need to clear out any existing data that may be in the data dump worksheet. So let's go to that worksheet. What we want to do is wipe out all the data that is in the entire worksheet. So I'm going to say ddump, my variable for that worksheet, dot used range, dot clear contents. And that's going to get rid of that. Now the last thing we need to do is copy the data from the 5-piece door breakdown into the data dump worksheet. So I'm going to use my variable for my 5-piece door breakdown, and I'm going to say dot used range dot copy, and I'm going to type the word destination followed by colon and equals, and I need to tell it where to copy it to, which is going to be to our data dump worksheet and range A1. So ddump dot range parentheses quote A1 in quotes and in parentheses. So that's all the code we need to accomplish everything I wanted to in this video. Let's step through that code. Let's make sure that everything is working properly. I want to go ahead and delete this 5-piece door breakdown and make sure our error message is working properly. I'm going to go to my home tab here, and I'm going to hit F8 and step through this. If everything's working right, we're going to get a a message box. And what's going to happen when it gets right here where it tries to define the variable or set the variable for this 5-piece store breakdown, that's when the error message is going to happen. So I'm going to hit F8, and you can see it jumped right up here to our error message. So F8, and there's our message box. I'm going to click OK and F8, and it's going to exit the sub. So let's go ahead and import that back in here and continue our code and make sure everything's working correctly. We're going to go right back through all this, and I'm going to come right in here because that's the first worksheet it's going to be doing some code on, and see if that's working properly. F8, and right now the door part last row is 16, so that's working, and it should wipe that out and take out the borders, and that worked. Now we're going to go to the dedump worksheet and wipe that out, put all that back in and in sub. So all that seems to be working real good. I'm just going to close this out. I'm going to come here to my home tab, and what I want to do, I've already got a button in here. Now if you guys don't know how to create these buttons, make sure you check out my video on that. It's in that playlist that I have the link to in the description. What I want to do though is assign a macro to that button that's going to bring up the code that we just got done writing. So I'm going to hit Alt F11, and I'm going to come up here and I'm going to grab my subroutine name. I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to right click on this button, and I'm going to click on Assign Macro. Now right here I'm going to click on New, and right there's our subroutine. Now you don't want to rename this one. You want to keep it just like it is, but I'm just going to type the word call and Control V to paste my subroutine in. So what's going to happen when you click that, it's going to say, hey, we need to call up that subroutine. Let's clear this out, come back in here, and there it is. So that's going to wrap it up for this video, guys. In the next video, we're going to be working with this data that we just imported. We're going to be breaking down this cabinet name to just a few characters. So make sure you stay tuned for that video. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, make sure you subscribe so you can get all my latest tips and tricks. If this video helped you out, how about give me a thumbs up? And as always, thank you for watching and have a good day.